So, even with the standard library complete, there's still more to go through. There are a few more chips to look at. These are the Navi summons, some of the most powerful and most visually appealing attacks in the game. I had a lot of fun researching these ones because, well, truth be told, the Navis in the first game were kinda strangely programmed, so it's kind of fun to see just how badly I could break some of them. So, without further ado, let's get right to the demonstrations. So the first Navi we'll be looking at is Roll. She's cute, she's adorable, and since she can heal you as well as harming the enemies, she's incredibly helpful. Upon being summoned, Roll immediately flies to the closest enemy, whapping them with her antenna. After she attacks, she also heals you. The recovery is not at all dependent upon the damage that Roll can do. It's kinda like she uses a low-level recovery chip on you. Roll uses Recover 30, Roll 2 uses Recover 50, and Roll 3 uses Recover 80. So it's kinda nice, an attack and recovery at the same time. Quite handy, that. Since Roll always attacks the first enemy she can find, she can target Megaman's viruses. She also seems to have a preference for attacking enemies on lower rows first. So with this many holes, attacking is normally a bit of a problem. However, Roll can float, so she can still get over there and attack. That much is to be expected. But the surprising thing is, Roll can even move through cubes. Physics don't work that way, Roll. Nothing can stop the cute. Next up we have GutsMan. And may I just take a moment to point out the odd fact that GutsMan 1 and 2 do less damage than Roll 1 and 2? Yeah. Anyway, he does kind of make up for it by the fact that he makes it pretty tricky for the enemies to move around. Once summoned, GutsMan immediately jumps to your front column, smashing the entire enemy field with shockwaves and cracking all their panels. If you get 2 GutsMan summons in a row, you can even break all their panels, really causing problems for the enemy. The only thing that can really get in the way of GutsMan's rampage is a hole. GutsMan has to have a solid panel to hit, otherwise his attack will completely fail. However, so long as he does slam a panel, he will still strike the entire enemy field. It's also worth noting that if your front column is gone, GutsMan really can't help you. He can't float, which means he can't hit the enemy field. And yet, despite his flaws, GutsMan can still ignore cubes. Stop wall hacking, you cheaters! Next up we have ProtoMan. Now this guy really starts bringing the damage and laying waste to the enemy, and he's also just way too cool to follow the rules. When ProtoMan is summoned, he dashes to the nearest column with an enemy in it, performing a slash with the same range as Widesword. He always attacks from the middle row in order to strike the entire column. Much like Roll, since ProtoMan attacks the first target he can find, he is capable of targeting Megaman's viruses. So, apparently cubes aren't much of a problem for ProtoMan either. Him and his elite hacksaw skills. Wait a minute. Don't tell me. Okay, let's see if this works. What? Now that's just silly. Next we have our first elemental Navi, who does quite a good bit of heat damage. It's time for FireMan. And for those who watched my main run, we know just how useful he can be.
you summon FireMan, he sets the row you called him from on fire! So, yes, he can only attack one row at a time, but that being said, he can hit multiple targets at once, and that makes him a very useful ally to have, especially with how early on you can get him in the game. Another nice thing about FireMan is the fact that even stage objects can't get in his way. Sorry, StoneMan, but there's no escaping the flames of justice! Though he can pierce stage objects, one of FireMan's few flaws is the fact that he cannot actually hit them. Really cooking! Fireman, wait, you forgot to cook the time bomb. Oh, never mind. Now, one thing to point out, despite the fact that they don't show hit points, the scuttles summoned by the life virus do still count as viruses, meaning Fireman can torch them just fine. Next up we have NumberMan. While his chips can be good for a laugh, he really isn't the most reliable Navi you could summon. Let's randomize it up. Once called into action, NumberMan rolls a die onto the enemy side of the field. Whatever he rolls is sent through a multiplier, and that's how much damage he does. Yeah. Now, obviously, since he's rolling dice to attack, his damage is always random, and that's the problem with trying to rely on NumberMan. But he does hit the entire enemy field, which does at least give him a nice spread attack. NumberMan 1 does 10 times whatever he rolls. NumberMan 2 does 20 times whatever he rolls. 40? That won't even kill the Metar. That sucked! Continuing the pattern, NumberMan 3 does 30 times whatever he manages to roll. Oh, yes! 180! Haha, nice! Oh, just a shame NumberMan isn't always that dependable. So while NumberMan's damage is horribly inconsistent, he is a smart Navi. No matter how many holes there are, nothing will stop his saving throw, not even only 2 panels remaining, both occupied. Now it does make it so that the explosions only hit everywhere past where the die lands, but hey, if the first column is all holes, that means there's nothing there for it to hit anyway. Next up we have StoneMan. And you might be wondering, what's the deal with his damage always looking the same? Yeah, there's a lot of explaining to do with this guy, so let's get right into it. Once he's called in, StoneMan randomly drops boulders on the enemy side of the field. The level of StoneMan chip you use determines just how many. For example, StoneMan 1 drops 3 sets of 3 boulders each. Obviously, it's a very hit-and-miss attack. StoneMan 2 drops 3 sets of 4 boulders each, so he at least has a somewhat better chance of hitting the enemy. Or not. That's a little better. There we go. And StoneMan 3 drops 3 sets of 5 boulders each. The attack is completely random in how it drops the boulders, and since it's always 3 sets of boulders, the most he can ever do to a single target is 300 damage, and that's if he's lucky enough to strike all 3 times. Sometimes, as is the case with this fishy virus here, he'll completely miss. What you want to do is to find ways to maximize StoneMan's potential. One of the best is to use Steel. After all, Steel and StoneMan can have the same code. Doing this makes the enemy area smaller, and thus gives StoneMan's boulders fewer areas they can land. Thus you're far more likely to maximize the damage. You can also use things like rock cubes and X panels in order to improve StoneMan's accuracy, because he doesn't seem to be able to drop boulders on stage objects or holes. However, when using holes for this purpose, there is something to be careful about. The problem is StoneMan's boulders do need panels to land on, so it sure does suck when you're up against an enemy that can float. Yeah,